Hello, welcome back to another video. Today I thought we would talk about how Astrid became as poorly as she is and kind of what happened to her, because I do get asked that question quite a lot by people that meet her. And I think in order to understand the road that we're on and where we are and where we're going, you need to understand where we've come from. So just to add in a bit of additional information there, so I am a midwife. I work at my local hospital's birth centre, and so I have quite a good understanding and underpinning knowledge of pregnancy, labour and birth. Secondly, Astrid is my second child and I had already laboured once before. And during my first pregnancy, I did a hypnobirthing course. I wanted things to be kind of hands off and as natural and normal as possible. And I had a forceps delivery with my son. So when in Astrid's pregnancy, kind of planning for birth, I never really considered that things could go wrong because, you know, I've had a baby before, my body's done it before, it knows what it's doing. It's going to be fine. I had planned to deliver at the birth centre where I work, potentially with a water birth, and yeah, like everything was going to be fine in my head. Astrid's pregnancy was completely low risk. There was nothing identified on any scan or any community appointment that would have raised any alarm bells to anyone. So fast forward to 33 weeks, which was just after Christmas. I felt like her movements had kind of decreased quite a bit, but I wasn't sure if they were there or not. I was kind of sat on the fence a little bit really, and I wasn't really sure because things were busy. It was just after Christmas. I've got a toddler, like our lives were very busy, and I wasn't sat there kind of feeling for every movement like you do with baby number one. And so I wasn't really sure, and because I wasn't too sure, I contacted my community midwife, who's also a friend of mine, and just said, I'm not really sure, you know. So she came to the house and did a antenatal check, had a little listen to the heart rate, had a measure of my bump. Everything was completely normal, nothing alarming, nothing to worry anybody, and I felt reassured. And then that evening I felt a few movements, so I was like, fine, we're all good. And that reassured me for a few more days. And then it came to the 3rd of January, so the day before Astrid was born, and at this point I felt like, yeah, these movements are definitely reduced. But I didn't have anyone to have my toddler, and I didn't want to take him up to the hospital. So I was like, I've got my mum's coming round tomorrow, I'll wait till then and I'll definitely go into the hospital. So that's what I did. I turned up to, well, after making the right kind of referral and phone calls, and they invited me into the maternity assessment unit. When I arrived, I saw the triage midwife, who did very quick check-in, had a listen to the heart rate with a handheld Doppler, and felt everything was looking normal, everything was all good. And so I waited in the waiting room to have a more in-depth monitoring. So after about 20 minutes, I was called through to have the monitoring, and they put me on a CTG. For those of you who don't know what that is, it stands for cardiotachograph, and it is the monitor that straps to your tummy and prints out the baby's heartbeat. So they attached me to that. After a few minutes, I was kind of staring at the screen thinking, I don't think this isn't looking too normal. And you know, as the time went on, I remember thinking, this is really not a very nice heart rate trace. And I remember texting a few of my midwife friends, sending them pictures like, look at this, oh my god, this is really bad, like really panicking because I was there on my own. I was kind of doing everything to try and get Astrid to move, like really poking my bump, rolling from side to side, like moving around, really trying to get her to respond to me. None of that worked. After about 20 minutes, the midwife who originally put me on the monitor came in and reiterated my thoughts in the fact that this isn't a normal trace, and that she had escalated to the registrar to come and review. I was like, okay, fine. After being on the monitor, I mean the timings is a little bit hazy, but I think possibly about half an hour, although it felt like forever, a consultant obstetrician arrived, and she looked at Astrid's monitoring, and the first thing she said to me was, when was the last time you had something to eat? Now, in medical language, that means you're going to have an operation. So I'm thinking, oh, this means they're going to get her out. And I remember my heart rate was going 100 miles an hour, and I was just thinking, I am not ready for this baby yet. Like, I've still got 6 weeks. She can't come now. Like, I'm not ready. The house isn't ready. Like, I can't have this baby now. And my husband wasn't there. He was at work, and you know, I was just kind of snowballing at this point. Then her second consultant came in, and he said, hang on a minute, let's get some more information and let's do a scan. So they took me off the monitor and we went over to the antenatal clinic fetal medicine department to have a scan. And at that point he did the scan, and he had a look at Astrid, and he said that she had something called fetal hydrops. Now, that is, for anyone that doesn't know, kind of swelling within the body, and it is a link to fetal anemia. He even said to me, I'd be very surprised if your baby isn't anemic. He also looked at the blood flow for the placenta, and said that there was an absent flow. And the scan reiterated what we had found out from the CTG, and that she was struggling in there and she needs to come out. And at that point he consented me for a category 2 cesarean section. So cesareans are categorised in their urgency from 1 to 4. 4 is an elective procedure, and 1 is this baby needs to come out now. So we were a category 2. At this point, we went to labour ward for them to prep me for the operation. My husband was there. We spoke to all the different teams. Well, we spoke to the anaesthetists, etc. And then after a short while, we went to theatre. The plan was to do the procedure under spinal anaesthetic, so a little bit like an epidural, where you go numb from kind of the chest down. So they did that. This whole time they were monitoring Astrid's heartbeat. Her heartbeat didn't get any better, so the heart rate tracing was just very flat. So what you want to see with a baby's heart rate is something called variability, which is how wiggly the line is, how much it goes up and down. So Astrid's didn't really go up and down, it was just kind of straight, which again is a sign of fetal anemia. So at this point they had put in the spinal anaesthetic. I was starting to go numb and I was lying down, and I could hear her heartbeat in the background, and I could hear it slowing. So going from kind of quite a nice normal rate to slowing right down. And I remember hearing the midwife tell the surgeon or the obstetrician that we've got a bradycardia. which is a dip in the, you know, the baby's heart rate's going down. And he kind of brushed her off and said, yeah, we're already in theatre. And then they started the procedure. So they started the cesarean section. And I don't really remember too much of terms of how long it took for them to get her out. I don't think it was very long. But when she was born, there was no cry. I know most mums will know what I mean, like when your baby's born, that you know, you listen for it, and it was very silent. And then the next thing I heard was the scrub nurse say, can we call for a neonatal crisis? Now the paediatricians were already in theatre, however, we had it was a junior team, and they needed more senior people to be called. So the surgeon gave Astrid to the paediatricians, and they were working on her in the corner of the operating theatre on a resuscitator, which is a big white unit, looks a bit like an incubator, with all the oxygen and things attached to it. And I heard the alarm going, so the emergency alarm, lots of people kind of running in, midwives, doctors, paediatricians, all sorts of people, trolleys being brought in, so emergency trolleys. I remember hearing them send the runner for theatre to the blood fridge to get the flying squad neonatal blood, O negative blood, to give to her, and they were resuscitating her. She was born without a heart rate, and she wasn't breathing, and she was a very white, kind of like the white on my top. And I remember hearing them count the chest compressions that they did, and count how many breaths they were giving her. I remember them confirming whether or not they'd seen her chest rise. Whilst the second team were trying to get IV access, and with newborns it's quite common that they do that through the umbilical cord. So they were putting a line in her umbilical cord so that they could administer adrenaline, which I heard. They were really struggling to get a breathing tube in, so they were trying to intubate her. So this, when they put the breathing tube down the throat to breathe for her, but because of the fetal hydrops and how swollen she was, how floppy she was, how much of in poor condition she was, this was really difficult to do, and it took what felt like a really long time. I remember the midwife that was with me, again, she's a friend of mine, having her hand over my ears so that I couldn't hear what they were doing. I think, you know, for some people, they might have found that reassuring to hear all those voices, like, work on your baby, but for me, I knew what all of those voices were doing. And you know, we're trained in neonatal resus, and I have performed that on other babies, and to hear it happen to your baby, knowing that you can't get up and get to her and help, was probably the hardest thing I have ever gone through in my life. Yeah, it took 22 minutes for them to be able to successfully intubate Astrid. Now 22 minutes doesn't sound like very long, but can you hold your breath for 22 minutes? Can you go without oxygen or blood flow around your body for 22 minutes? When they had successfully intubated her, they went to remove her from theatre and take her to the neonatal intensive care unit next door. As they went to wheel her out, they said to me and my husband, we're going to wheel her out in a minute. Make sure you look to your right. So she was coming through this side, because we can't stop. So the first kind of glimpse of her that I got was them wheeling her out, and they were, you know, her sheets were covered in blood. There was wires all over her. There was a doctor kind of stood holding her airway, and giving her kind of breaths. And yeah, she was this white. She was really white. And then they took her. We obviously we stayed in theatre until they'd finished the cesarean, so time to get the placenta out and put me back together, those kind of things. The next thing I remember is being in recovery and just laying there thinking I should be holding my baby now. Yeah, you. And just hearing lots of kind of whispers and, you know, that kind of feeling that everybody else knows more than you do. And we did have a paediatrician come and see us and just sort of say, you know, she was born in a very bad way. She's being worked on and we'll keep you updated. And that was kind of all we'd heard, and all we heard for a while. Then what felt like hours of not really hearing anything, 2 neonatal consultants came in the room where we were on labour ward with one of our matrons. And I remember the matron kind of looking at my husband Ben saying, I think you need to go and hold Harriet's hand. And in my head, that was, we're going to be given bad news. They're going to tell me my baby's died. At that point, she was still alive, but she was very, very poorly. And they were basically just kind of telling us everything that they've done so far and what monitors she was on and that sort of thing. So that was a lot to process. Then a few more hours passed and the same matron came in the room with a wheelchair, and she said, I need to take you to see her now. I was like, okay. She was like, no, now. I need you to get up now. And I'd not obviously got up post-surgery. I was still very numb from the anaesthetic. And to this day, I do not know how I got out of that bed, but I did. And she kind of pushed me very swiftly to neonatal intensive care. And we got there in ITU and they put like a screen around us. And there was so many people around Astrid's incubator, I couldn't really see her. And they were, you know, they didn't even notice that we were there. they were just, you know, doing bits and pieces. And I'm not a neonatal nurse, so some of the monitors, I don't even know what they were doing, but they, you know, the alarms were going off, red flashing lights on them, and I was stood holding my husband's hand, and the matron was behind me, and she said to me, "Don't worry, her last moments will be with you." Sorry. And God, I don't think I've ever been told a worse sentence in my life. So I was screaming, "My baby's gonna die." But they didn't stop. I was thinking that they were gonna kind of withdraw care and just give her to me, but they didn't. They kept working on her, and as we sat there, it was like I was sat frozen and they were kind of working in fast forward, like around me, and one by one all of these people just kind of disappeared, and then there was just us sat there with her nurse, and she was there, and her heart rate was beating away on the screen. She was okay. She was alive, and she was still with us, and that was the first kind of sign that we got to learn how strong she was. And that's when we decided on her name, Astrid. So Astrid is a Norwegian name. It means divinely beautiful, but we had first heard it on a programme called Vikings, and Astrid was one of the shield maidens, one of the warrior women. So we felt like this was a strong name for her, for somebody who was fighting so hard to be here and stay with us. She deserved a fighting strong name. So I think I'm gonna leave it there. Sorry, my voice has gone funny. I'm gonna leave it there and then pick up on our neonatal intensive care unit journey in another video. As ever, I will try and answer any questions, but please be aware that this story was really hard for me to tell, and it's a time of my life that I will always regret. Is not going into that hospital earlier and not getting her looked at and not getting her out earlier. It's guilt that I will carry forever. So there is nothing that you could say that could make me feel worse, but please be mindful in your comments and be kind. Thank you.